Welcome to this new Blender tutorial. If you type Volumetric Caustics on Google, you are going to see what I'm talking about. There are amazing effects which can be done with volumetric scattering and absorption of light, including caustics. It's basically some light source, volumetric light as it's called in computer graphics, some refractive or reflective objects, and you can see the caustics going through the volumes of dust or something like that. If you search for prisms, you are going to see what kind of really beautiful and useful effects it can be used to. So let's stop with this rubbish talk and start our tutorial by starting Blender. I'm using Blender version 2.78c and also LuxRender, so make sure you have downloaded LuxRender and unpacked in some folder like Blender, and also you have the converter, the LuxBlender or LuxBlend. It should be unpacked inside 2.78, scripts, add-ons, and there is it. So Blender can recognize it as a render. Now you can just go to User Preference, Add-ons, and select LuxRender in the list and activate it. And now you are ready to select LuxRender as render, engine, and let's try rendering our scene to make sure it's working. Well, it doesn't work, so throw your computer from the window. If you still didn't follow this last step, you can also try to figure out what is going on. You can see there is an output path pointed to temp folder. This has to be the standalone LuxRender folder and also not the LuxBlend. Yeah, now you can see our rendered cube. So let's start to build our scene, our basic scene, by deleting this cube and adding a plane, resizing the plane, and now we can add a focus for light and configure it. So I select the light, but as a spotlight and show cone, and adjust its angle. You can see when I grab the light, it's fixed pointing to the same direction. So I can track it to this empty and put like to -z up x. So now when I grab it, it's always pointing to the empty axis. Pressing numpad 0, you can view from the camera and adjust its position selecting it. By pressing RX and RY, you can rotate it in X and Y axis. And we can also adjust this focal length. Now we can maybe come back from our camera view. So let's create, say, a sphere. It's gonna be our glass sphere. You can grab it, resize it, whatever. You will find a nice position for it. Maybe nicer than my position. You can, for instance, go back, forth, upwards, downwards. And now you can see our sphere rendered with a basic diffuse shader and without smooth. By selecting smooth shading, it's gonna interpolate our vertices instead of rendering flat faces. And we can also go to the material configuration tab and add a glass shader to our sphere. And you can even change the index of refraction here, as you see. And if we render the scene again, you are going to see our glass sphere and also the caustics, because LuxRender is already configured to use them. In order to configure the volume which are going to scatter and absorb light, we have to set its limits, and we're going to add a box to set them. So let's add a new box and resize it until it covers our entire scene. For more complex limiting objects, you may have to go to Edit mode, press N in order to see the transform panel, and find normals and click on display face normals as lines and ensure that all the normals are going from inside to outside. Now by going to the Object Configuration tab, you can click Maximum Draw Type and set it to Wire. So we need to create a material for that, and we are going to use the material nodes. So let's create a new material nodes view. Create a new material, click Use Material Nodes, and now we have to delete this matte material shader and add a transparent shader, fully transparent, so that we can't see the surface of our cube. So now go to World Configuration tab, and we have to add two volume setups. The first is going to be the air, and it has to be clear, and the second one is going to be the dust or something that scatter and absorb light. So we set the scattering to completely white and set its scattering scale to something like 0.0005 and render it again. So now we can't see anything because we just created the setups and didn't configure it for anything. So select the box, go back to the Material Edit tab and set the interior volume to be dust and the exterior volume to be air. And now go back to the World tab and set the default exterior to be dust. And now let's render it again. So now we started to see some kind of volumetric light in our scene. Yeah, there is there, but it's still not showing up any volumetric caustics and not even volumetric shadow. So we have to increase the absorption or make the absorption color darker. And now render it again. It started to be like too, yeah, you can see the light is being too much absorbed. So maybe like something lighter as absorption color. And let's try it again, rendering, and yeah, wait. Now it is. I think I'm seeing some volumetric caustics. Yeah, there is the volumetric caustics. So we are getting already volumetric caustics. The good of LuxRender is that everything is already configured because it's a physically based render. So let's grab a little bit of camera and move it to see the caustics from a better angle. And yeah, grab a little bit this sphere and Z and X directions. Wow. And now you see we are getting much better effects of our volumetric caustics. So the LuxRender also offers some tools to configure an image. So you can select like tone mapping, because the image rendered like as HDR, so there are many levels of color or light being rendered, so you have to tone map it to see just the 8 bits of light it's displayed on our screen. And we can also adjust some photographic response, like film response configurations, like gamma, what's related to dynamic range, and also film response, what includes color, and so you started to see to improve our experience of rendering, of seeing the scene. It's just some miscellaneous, and you can even change the color or bright of each light in this light groups tab. You just have to create different light groups if you have different lights in your scene, and also apply some lens effects if you want. And yes, in this render configuration tab you will see the rendering mode, which is bidirectional. You can set it to OpenCL or GPU if you want, like strategy, sampler, and if you set up to advanced, it started to like make big samplers of light, and it helps to converge faster to a final image, final rendering. So close it and back to your scene and to your render tab. Sometimes you can change like the sampler in order to find a faster rendering, but it's not our case. You can see that it's focusing on the brightest areas, and our volumetric caustics is relatively dark in comparison to this brightest ground, which are receiving direct light. So we can back to the metropolis algorithm and render. So I've made a new setup with a new plane, a mirror. You can see it's set it to metal, to shiny metal without roughness, and a new glass sphere. And yeah, that's our new setup. And I render it. After 20 minutes of rendering, there is the scene we got. You can see our scene appears both in LuxRender and in Blender. And if you want to save the image, you have to just File, Export Image, and turn Mapped Low Dynamic Range to save it like PNG or JPG. And you can give it a name. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Like if you liked it. And thanks for watching. See you next time.